Pioneers in any field often have to deal with skepticism, lack of acceptance, and even derision. In the 1960s, Ann Arbor and the University of Michigan were home to pioneers in many different fields, constituting a veritable thought revolution. A group of avant-garde composers who were part of that milieu recently returned to Ann Arbor, where appreciative audiences and the University of Michigan welcomed them home. John Lofi has the story.
The founding of the Peace Corps, teach-ins protesting the Vietnam War, SDS, and the Port Huron Statement. These seminal events occurred at the University of Michigan campus, helping to launch a national upheaval in politics and culture. And a group of composers were on the leading edge of that thought revolution simply by making the music they wanted to hear. American music is Mark Clegg's specialty, and he wrote the program for the celebration of the 50th anniversary of Ann Arbor's Once Festival.
Who were the main players, and what did they do to get this thing organized?
There's really a core group of 5 composers that are credited with founding Once. There's Roger Reynolds, Robert Ashley, Gordon Muma, Don Scavarda, and George Cacioppo.
And with the exception of Cacioppo, who died in 1984, the original Once composers reconvened on campus to commemorate the Once Festival, and just maybe to reveal a few of its secrets, like this one from Gordon Muma.
The way that I have always thought of this is that the foreground is shifting from the background.
Turns out the turbulent 60s actually started in the buttoned-down 1950s.
We had the influx of the GI Bill people and the diversity of the creative arts here, music being one, but the theater, the visual arts, creative writing programs were extraordinary. And because at that time, the music department was really scattered into buildings around the campus area, we were all in the same physical milieu. So we interacted beautifully, and that was an extraordinary nourishment.
The department was scattered around campus because the School of Music was brand new. Begun in 1949 by composer Ross Lee Finney, the fledgling department attracted students from diverse areas of interest, including a young engineer named Roger Reynolds.
I quit my engineering job and came back to the university to study music. Ross Lee Finney, who was the composer in residence at that time at Michigan, taught a course called Composition for Non-Composers. And week after week, he destroyed everything I brought in. So at one point, I said to myself, if he doesn't like this, I'm out of here. And almost as though he had known that, he said, no, we have something we can work with here. And we had an incredible several hour-long session. And I remember Ross looked at me and he said, you're hooked, aren't you? And I was.
Ross Lee Finney hammered home the rigor of composition, and when he took a sabbatical in 1960, his students were ready for the more instinctively supportive tone of his replacement, modernist composer Roberto Gerhard.
When someone comes in from the outside, they aren't tied to the political structures and all the battles, and so they bring a kind of breath of fresh air to the university, and that really worked for these composers. And they had all the discipline and the knowledge and the method that they had gotten from Finney. And then Roberto Gerhard was just sort of released this energy that had been pent up in a really positive and supportive way.
All that was needed for a creative explosion was an inciting incident, and the students found one when they were snubbed on a road trip.
It was supposed to be an international conference on composers in Ontario, and we realized that we were completely unable to meet with anybody, talk with anybody. We didn't have badges. We weren't official, so we didn't get to talk to anybody. And on the way back, we said, you know, we could give a better festival than that.
They didn't need no stinking badges. They'd throw their own events.
How was it received then by?
Mad success. I mean, we had standing room audiences from the first concert through the 50th concert.
Over a 5-year run, Once grew from self-contained weekend festivals focused mainly on music to non-discrete activities throughout the year, including concerts, theater, films, lectures, radio and TV presentations, publications, and actions. Once attracted renowned artists such as John Cage, Pauline Oliveros, and Eric Dolphy, among many others, and garnered international attention in avant-garde communities in New York, Toronto, and Paris. According to Alan Haber, the first president of the group Students for a Democratic Society, or SDS, Once represented a thought revolution in art and was at the vanguard of later movements that came to define the 1960s.
So it was not just the music, it was in the art, it was in scholarship, and politics was kind of the last that came around to put all this together, that there was really another way of seeing the world. And I think that allowed everybody to break the bonds a little bit, to reach out, to go where they would like to, but it wasn't the academy.
Another interesting thing that's sort of controversial is the relationship to the university. It couldn't have happened without the university, and yet it could only happen outside of the university.
And that tension must have actually fed into the creativity.
Absolutely.
50 years after the first concerts, the music still inspires professor of composition Michael Daugherty.
What do you like about their music?
Well, what I like about the music is that it's cutting edge, it's provocative, and it's innovative. I mean, I think that a lot of it is that the ideas they came up with are very new. I mean, the use of electronic music, the use of writing music without musical scores, the idea of using visuals and so forth. This was a new concept.
The original Once composers are challenging a new set of young musicians at the Once More Festival. Creative Arts Orchestra director Mark Kirshenman showed me a musical score completely devoid of treble clefs, time signatures, or even notes.
So they have this pathway they can take to accomplish that. They can also do it in this pathway or this ring here. So these symbols are completely unique to this one piece. I don't think he ever used it before or after. And this piece is 50 years old, and the students now are like, oh, okay.
So that
It's
we're
changed.
catching up to him.
It's changed. Yes, and we're catching up to it
And
now.
so that's what they say by the avant-garde. He's
Yeah.
out there leading the pack, and we're actually
Absolutely.
learning how to follow along and listen.
And that's one of the tests, I think, yeah, because the students now are very well equipped to deal with this and are having a lot of fun with it.
The sound is just like delicious. There's a certain moment where it's just delicious.
Linnea Powell is a second-year master's student in viola performance.
In this piece specifically, he's playing with space, so there's a lot of counting, and then you play one note and there's a lot of space, and it's seemingly random. So it's sort of a cognitive shift in a sense.
You keep on smiling when you're talking about this music. What is it that you like about it?
I think personally it's cool for me to see that this is a historic piece. A lot of the music that I have played that's contemporary music, a lot of music that I've played that's been written a couple years ago is all, you know, a stepping stone from this groundbreaking music. So it's a timepiece and it's really cool to see.
Can you hear the electronic part from here all right?
Is there any lessons that you can take from what these young guys did back then when you're teaching your students now? What kinds of lessons translate forward?
Sure. Well, you know, what translates forward, I think, is that you see these guys who are 80 years old who act like they're 20. You know, they have the same energy, they're still being creative, they're still pushing the boundaries. What the students have seen is that, wow, I could be even more crazy, you know, than I am. You know, like, wow, those guys were doing some pretty wild stuff. I could even be more so.
We have war because we are not sufficiently heroic for a life which does not need war.
So, was Once political? Or was it just students carving out a space in which to put forth their own creative vision? Either way, there's a lesson for students in any age.
Looking back 50 years, it's very clear to me that they had a political edge. And that's part of what interests me about Once as a phenomenon, is that these students were changing the world. If there's anything I'm hoping our students get, it's that, you know, we're trying to propel them to leave the classroom and go out and make their own opportunities.